Hello, this is Lisa, CEO of Sight for White, welcoming you to this week's Talking News on Saturday, the 2nd of July, 2022. This week it's been brought to our attention again the problems that are currently being encountered by some of our members who have Barclaycards that were issued after May this year. There is a problem with the contactless on these cards working. Last year, in the December newsletter, we looked at the machines that were available at the time, which was only one, and how an overlay had been issued to all card providers to put onto the machines. The reality is people, of course, take the machines out of the box, throw the box away and don't realise that the overlay is in there. I am now speaking to a couple of the credit card companies on the island in a plea to sort this out. What has come to light is that the machines do have a VI button on them, which should be able to help people locate the keys using sound. This is something we need to look further into so that we can advise members exactly how to use these features on the different machines. So please be assured that we are looking into it. Finally, with preparations going ahead for the next newsletter, if anybody does have any tips, advice, or anything they would like to include in the newsletter, for example, a member profile about your own lived experience, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Chris at the office, 522205. Thank you very much. Lisa, CEO, Sight for White.
Hello, this is Steve reading a story from On the Wight. Headlined, Isle of Wight residents and visitors urged to stay safe as new COVID wave hits the island. And I can confirm that it's actually hit me. The council are not asking people to put their lives on hold again, but to remember to take those basic precautions that are known to work against COVID. With an increase in cases of COVID-19 across the island, people are again being urged to do all they can to protect themselves and others from the virus. Local data shows the number of recorded cases has risen steeply from 40 on the 22nd of May to 240 on the 22nd of June, fueled by a new Omicron variant. It comes as the island gears up to welcome thousands of visitors and holidaymakers for the busy summer season. Residents and visitors alike are being asked to make sure they and their families are fully vaccinated against COVID and to get the booster if eligible. People should also remember the basics to keep the virus at bay. Wash or sanitize hands regularly. Try to meet outdoors if possible. Keep indoor spaces well ventilated. Wear a mask if you can in busy indoor settings and don't mix with people if you're feeling unwell. Simon Bryant, the Council's Director of Public Health, said, "Much as we would all like to put the pandemic behind us and think that COVID has gone away, unfortunately, it is still very much here and is once again spreading quickly through our communities. We're not asking people to put their lives on hold again, and we want everyone to enjoy the summer holidays on our beautiful island. All we ask is that people remember to take those basic precautions that we know work against COVID, and perhaps most importantly of all, make sure you're up to date with the vaccinations. It's not too late to get your first, second or initial booster dose of the COVID-19 vaccination. These remain available to all who are eligible. If you've been invited for a booster, please get it." Councillor Carl Love, Cabinet Member for Public Health, added, "It's really important to take action to protect yourself, your family, friends and work colleagues. There is a perception that COVID doesn't cause serious illness anymore, but for some people that is not the case. The virus is still causing some people to become very ill. Please help to protect our island community. If you are ill and suspect COVID, please stay at home to prevent it spreading. We must not infect others, especially vulnerable people and those working in our essential services. Times are tough, but if you are poorly with a fever or respiratory symptoms or test positive for COVID-19, please stay at home and limit contact with others. If you need help with treating COVID, there are some useful tips on the NHS website. Please don't be afraid to ask for help. The Council's COVID-19 helpline is still available on 01983 823600, and the islehelp.me website is a really good resource for all sorts of help and advice. It's more important than ever that we all take precautions to look after our community and are vaccinated.
Road through Newchurch set for 3-week closure in the height of summer. From Island Echo, read by Joyce. Motorists face travel disruption for several weeks in July and August as a result of the closure of the main road through Newchurch, all because of a new pedestrian bridge that has been installed. It has been revealed that Island roads will be closing Langbridge and the Chute for a period of 3 weeks at some point between 1st July and 12th August, the busiest time of the year. It is to enable footway accessibility improvement works to be completed to allow access to a new pedestrian bridge that has been installed. As previously reported by Island Echo, new 12.5 metre footbridge has been put in place in Newchurch to provide safe pedestrian access through the village. It means walkers will no longer have to navigate the narrow and busy stretch of road over the stone bridge. Island Echo readers commented earlier this month how the bridge did not appear to be accessible to all users, with a step up onto a concrete block. Now, work is being undertaken to create an access point to the bridge and to ensure it meets modern standards. The route through Newchurch and Winford is popular with local drivers trying to avoid the Bay Area, as well as tourists visiting attractions such as the Garlic Farm. So the closure will be felt hard, especially for those travelling from Ryde towards the South Wight and vice versa. Under the proposed scheme, the road will remain closed both night and day. Island Echo has approached the Isle of Wight for a statement, but a week later, a response has not been provided.
This is an article from the Island Echo, read by Terry. 2 Isle of Wight men charged as part of Class A drug supply investigation. 27-year-old James Rose and 44-year-old Martin Shotton have been charged with possession of Class A drugs with intent to supply and will go before Portsmouth magistrates this Thursday. As reported by Island Echo previously, it was on Tuesday that police noticed a suspect vehicle travelling into Hampshire via the A3. The car was stopped by officers on St George's Road, Portsmouth. It is alleged that a passenger left the vehicle and ran towards the Millennium Walkway at Gunwharf Quays before discarding a rucksack containing suspected Class A drugs into the water. 2 men were arrested as part of inquiries and they have since been charged. James Brian Rose, 27, of North Road in Shanklin, has been charged with concealing criminal property and 2 counts of possession of Class A drugs with intent to supply. Martin Andrew Shotton, 44, of Sun Hill in Cowes, has been charged with concealing criminal property, drug driving, and 2 counts of possession of Class A drugs with intent to supply. Both men have been remanded in custody to appear at Magistrates' Court in Portsmouth.
This is Alison reading an article from the Island Echo entitled Huge Cannabis Farm Discovered and Arrests Made Following Raid in Little London. A cannabis farm worth an estimated £100,000 has been discovered in a warehouse in Newport, with 2 males arrested on suspicion of being concerned in the production of Class B drugs. 6 police vehicles descended on the warehouse unit at Little London shortly before 1700 hours on Wednesday. Inside the property, officers discovered no less than 100 cannabis plants, each thought to have a street value of £1,000. The commercial premises and a Vauxhall Astra car were cordoned off by police, with a scene guard having remained in place overnight and throughout the morning. Forensics are expected to arrive in Newport ahead of the cannabis plants being removed from the building. Hampshire Constabulary has confirmed that 2 men, a 41-year-old man and a 46-year-old man, have been arrested on suspicion of being concerned in the production of Class B drugs. The 41-year-old has also been arrested on suspicion of possession of a knife. They remain in custody at this time.
Hi, this is Steve reading a story from Island Echo headlined Pensioner Population on the Isle of Wight up by nearly 25%, census reveals. The Isle of Wight's population of people over 65 has grown by 25%, an increase of 8,200 in the last 10 years alone, data from the Office for National Statistics has shown. Data from the 2021 census has revealed the large growth in pensioners in the last decade compared to a decrease in children aged 0 to 15. Nationally, the over 65 population has grown by 20.1%, so the Isle of Wight is around 5% above the national average. The most populous age bracket in the latest census is people between the 70 to 74 years of age. That's 11,200. This follows the data of 10 years ago when the most frequent age of island inhabitants was between 60 and 74. While the number of elderly people has gone up, the number of children has fallen by 6.3%, from 20,900 down to 19,600, a decrease of 1,300 children. This revelation comes just weeks after island school leaders said the island should scrap up to 25% of its primary schools due to a lack of education proficiency for large classes. The number of islanders aged 15 to 64 has also fallen by 5.3%. The overall population of the Isle of Wight has grown by 1.5%, up to 140,400 in the last 10 years, up from 138,300. Of that number, 72,400 are female and 78,100 are male. Although the overall population has increased by just 2,100, the number of households on the Isle of Wight has increased by 3,950, up to 64,800 in total. That's an increase of 6.1%.
Plans put forward for controversial Shalfleet mega development after 2 years of discussions. From Island Echo, read by Joyce. A well-publicised large-scale proposed housing development in Shalfleet has been put forward to planners after 2 years of deliberation about its feasibility. Extending the recently constructed Burt Close development, the Warlands Partnership has submitted the housing scheme to the Isle of Wight Council. It could see 70 properties, 43 market value and 27 affordable properties built on crop growing land in a mix of housing types. If planning permission is granted, work could start on the site as soon as early 2023, with the affordable properties built first. The scheme would use the main spine road through Burt Close to extend the existing housing provision, but also create pedestrian and cyclist access to Warlands Lane. Plans have twice been presented to Shalfleet Parish Council and residents in recent years, with developers using feedback to address planning documents submitted by agents Nicholas Taylor and Associates Planning. Said the houses would be offered for first refusal to residents of the parish, those who have previously lived there or those with a family connection to the village, in line with the council's legal agreements. They would then be offered to those living in adjacent parishes, followed by any island residents, and only then would they be available to people from the mainland. The land, which has been in the ownership of the Jacob family for nearly 30 years, was identified for housing by the Isle of Wight Council's Strategic Housing Land Available Assessment in 2018, but has since been removed. Speaking at a Shalfleet Parish Council meeting in May 2021, Simon Jacobs said they were looking to create a legacy so long-standing Shalfleet families, their children and grandchildren, can continue to live, work and bring up their families in the village. You can view the plans 22/00989/FUL on the Council's planning register. Comments can be submitted until July 22nd.
This is an article from the Island Echo, read by Terry. Cyclist taken to hospital after being flung over bonnet of car in Wootton. A male cyclist has been conveyed to hospital after being hit by a car in Wootton on Wednesday. Police and paramedics were called to the scene outside the sloop at Wootton Bridge at around 18:45. Island Echo understands the female driver of a silver Renault Clio pulled out of Market Square into the path of the cyclist, who was thrown over the bonnet. He has been conveyed to St Mary's Hospital for treatment, but is thought to have escaped any serious injuries. No offences have been identified at this stage. The road remains open with slight delays.
This is Alison, reading an article from the Isle of Wight Radio entitled Rupert the Donkey Back Home After Colic Recovery. Rupert the Donkey is safely back home on the Isle of Wight, having made a strong recovery from colic. The donkey travelled courtesy of Whitelink on Monday. It is in stark contrast to a week ago when the sanctuary issued a desperate plea to find him travel. After eventually securing a free ferry trip, he was urgently rushed to the Liphook Equine Hospital for treatment. Since then, he has had solid food and his digestive system has worked perfectly. As he made the journey home, staff from Whitelink popped down to say hello. They tweeted, "We are incredibly happy to hear that Rupert the donkey is making a strong recovery from his serious colic last Monday. After helping him get to the mainland last week with free emergency travel, we couldn't help but pop out to the lanes and say hello as he prepared to sail back home to the Isle of Wight Donkey Sanctuary today."
Hi, this is Steve reading a story from Isle of Wight Radio, headlined Red Funnel bans e-scooters over fire safety fears. Concerns over fire safety have led to Red Funnel banning e-scooters in and around its terminals and on board its ferries. The firm said it has made the decision over fears of batteries catching alight and accidents resulting in personal injury. The ban comes into force from Friday, that's July the 1st. It also applies to push scooters. It means those travelling won't be able to take e-scooters on board, even if they're being carried. Red Funnel said the ban reflects similar practice across the transport sector. However, Whitelink and Hover Travel have confirmed they will not be following suit. A spokesperson for Hover Travel said, "There is no regulation which prohibits the carrying of e-scooters on our hovercraft, and as long as the battery is in good working order, these items will be placed in the luggage compartment along with the e-bikes and skateboards we also transport." Hover Travel does, however, prohibit the use of e-scooters on board its craft, on the pad areas and within both of its terminals for the safety of its customers and staff. A Whitelink spokesperson said, "Whitelink welcomes e-scooters if accompanied by their riders. They will be carried free of charge in the same way as bicycles. E-scooters must be left on the vehicle deck of ferries or the bike store of Fast Cats and not taken to the passenger lounges." Red Funnel said, "Our policy is consistent with other transport operators and reflects a policy undertaken by ABP, that's Associated British Ports, which prohibits the use of scooters in any part of their port operations and estates. We thank our customers for understanding that our onboard and terminal areas are unsuitable environments for scooter usage. The safety of our customers and staff is our top priority. The move comes following a rise in the increase in e-scooter fires. In London, firefighters were called to more than 130 fires involving e-scooter and e-bike batteries.
Firefighters across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight to consider strike action over pay. From Island Echo, read by Joyce. Strike action is being considered by firefighters across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight over a 2% pay rise offer, which has been branded an insult by union bosses. Firefighters have been offered a 2% pay rise to come into force on the 1st of July, but the Fire Brigades Union claims that there has been a real terms pay cut of 12% or £4,000 over the past 12 years, with this latest pay offer being below inflation yet again. Matt Rack, FBU General Secretary, has said, "This proposal will anger firefighters, those working in emergency fire controls and those in all uniformed roles in fire services across the UK. It is galling to be insulted in this way, especially after our contribution to public safety during the pandemic." Firefighters will now inevitably begin to discuss reactions, including industrial action. The Fire Brigades Union and our members do not consider or take industrial action lightly or without ensuring that all efforts to resolve the issue have been exhausted. To that end, we will be writing to the National Fire Employers to inform them of the anger and frustration their proposal will create. Our members will now begin to discuss this offer, and the Executive Council will reconvene shortly to discuss our next steps. We will now consider all options, including strike action. Dave Hunt, who heads up the Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Fire Brigades Union as Brigade Chair, has said, "Today's 2% offer, with a backdrop of 9.6% inflation and a cost of living crisis, is an insult to firefighters who stepped above and beyond during the global pandemic. They have sacrificed enough and deserve far better."
This is an article from the Island Echo, read by Terry. Sandown Dental Practice to stop NHS care after 30 years, leaving patients in the lurch. Patients of Sandown Dental Practice have been left shocked by the news that the dentists will no longer be offering NHS care at all as of 1st of July, as yet another Isle of Wight dental practice goes private, adding to the local crisis. The practice, based on the Broadway, says that ending the NHS contract has been an extremely difficult decision, having provided National Health Service care for over 3 decades. Those who cannot afford to go private or are unwilling are being advised to seek contact details for NHS dental practices, but there are none. A quick search at www.nhs.uk/search/find-a-dentist reveals that all listed island dentists are not currently taking on new NHS patients, or are only taking on those who have been referred. Parents of children already registered at Sandown Dental are being advised that their children can still attend, but on a private basis. Examinations for children already registered will be free for those aged 0 to 5, £10 for 6 to 12-year-olds, and £20 for those aged 13 to 17. Over 18s will pay the standard private fee. One parent has expressed their upset about the situation, saying, "My children have always been there. Now, with no alternatives and tough times, what are we supposed to do?" The news comes just weeks after councillors said more needs to be done to solve the island's dentistry problems. It has been revealed that there were no takers for a big NHS dental practice on the island, which could have provided enough capacity to solve the current issues. A recent report has also revealed that only 1 in 4 children aged up to 17 were seen by a dentist between July and December of last year. And there's a footnote that says, "Those who find themselves in pain but without a dentist can call 111 to seek urgent dental treatment."
This is Alison reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio entitled "Toy Master Applies to Shrink its Shanklin Shop." A once popular toy and sports equipment store in Shanklin wants to shrink its shop. Toy Master on Regent Street, in the heart of the town, spans the space of 4 properties on the street, but it is now too much space for the store. In a planning application submitted to the Isle of Wight Council earlier this month, Martha James of Plan Research, on behalf of Stephen Young, says the additional floor space is no longer required due to changes in the business. Mrs. James said the space was last used as part of the Toy Master store in November 2021. The building had previously been a house, but was split into a flat above and used as an extension of the store from May 2012. Now, 10 years later, the ground floor retail space could be converted into a flat. Due to the former uses of the building, there is already a kitchen and bathroom on the ground floor, so the only works required include a general refurbishment, blocking the access between the store and the flat, and reinstating a window. The rest of the store would remain in retail use. You can view the plans, reference 22/01073/3 MPA on the Council's planning register. Comments can be submitted until July the 22nd.
Hello, this is Steve reading a story from Island Echo, headlined "Island and Mainland Children Take Part in Wartime Recreation Event at Steam Railway." An event organised by the Isle of Wight Council's Heritage Education Service, the HES, which recreated the scenario that tens of thousands of school children went through during the early months of World War II, was held recently. Based at Haven Street's Isle of Wight Steam Railway, this event allowed children to discover what it was like to be evacuated during the Second World War, with Haven Street Station transformed to replicate a wartime station, and children undertaking activities relevant to those of evacuees. Children and staff from both island and mainland schools dressed in wartime clothes, with some arriving at the Isle of Wight Steam Railway with gas masks, teddy bears and luggage ahead of a ride on the train, mirroring the experience from the war years. Pupils were able to learn about wartime food and rationing, how life in a wartime school affected learning, and had the chance to look at make-do-and-mend toys and clothes. Activities included learning about rationing, how much margarine was allowed each week, as well as how to make that sweet treat last a bit longer. As happened during the war, their school lessons were interrupted by an air raid siren, and they experienced a visit to the air raid shelter. Pupils also undertook a ride on the train with a bomb in the line. The event was planned and presented by Estelle Barker, the HES officer, and a team of volunteers.
Our monthly coffee morning is on Tuesday at God's Hill Old Smithy, between 10:30am and 12pm. Yvonne and Linda are lovely volunteers, will be there, and it is always a very enjoyable morning. All welcome.
Coffee and chat is on every Wednesday at Millbrook House, 10am to 11:30am, and it's only £1 for coffee and cake. please come along for a chat and members of staff will be there for any assistance with equipment and information.
On Tuesday, 12th of July, we have our monthly lunch club at the 8 Bells, Carisbrooke, at 12:30. Please let Susan know by Friday if you wish to attend.
This is an advance notice that our monthly book group will meet on the first Thursday of the month between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. in Newport Library, starting in August. The group is free to join and are looking for more members. If you like listening to books and would like to then discuss the book within a small group, please call the office and we can arrange the book to be sent to you prior to the group meeting.
We have now started preparing for Newport Carnival on July 23rd, and we would love our members, staff, volunteers and families to take part in the parade. The carnival starts at 7 p.m. and the route is around 2 miles, but do not worry if you're unable to walk that far. You can sit in the minibus or car and wave to the crowds promoting the charity. We would like representatives of all our activities to take part and show the Isle of Wight what we do and how we help islanders living with sight loss. If you would like to join us, please call either Susan or Jasmine for more details.
And please remember to return your Talking News questionnaire, which you should have all received, or alternatively, call the office on 522205 with your replies. And now we move on to the county press and our news articles. Yacht in difficulty. Yarmouth Lifeboat was sent to assist a 33-foot yacht in difficulty northwest of the Needles on Monday evening. Yarmouth's 7-class all-weather lifeboat, Eric and Susan Hiscock, was launched at 6:28 p.m. The RNLI volunteer crew found the sailing boat as it struggled in a westerly winds of 22 to 27 knots and moderate sea difficulties. The 4 crew members on board the casualty vessel were concerned that they were unable to maintain secure steerage in the unfamiliar, locally challenging conditions and were being swept towards navigational hazards. After assessing the situation, the Yarmouth lifeboat crew escorted them to safety of Yarmouth Harbour.
Shopping vouchers for islanders in need. Islanders most in need are being offered vouchers to help buy food during the cost of living crisis. The scheme allows people to spend the one-off vouchers at one of the island's major supermarkets or in one of the new community pantries. A food voucher worth £125 is available to applicants in receipt of local council tax support and pension credit guarantee credit. Those in receipt of local council tax support and benefits related free school meals or early years pupil premium can apply for a £50 food voucher. Meanwhile, households in receipt of local council tax support with no children or pensioners can apply for a food voucher worth £25. Full details including how to apply for a voucher are available on Connect for Communities website. Application forms can be completed online with paper copies, also available from community outlets, including libraries and some schools. The voucher scheme forms part of a package of new supportive measures to help households with children, the elderly, and other residents who are struggling financially.
Centenary celebration. 3 Bay centenaries, including one of our members, Ruby Cooper, Peggy Forward and Lillian Fawkes, met the Earl and Countess of Wessex during their recent Jubilee visit to the island and shared memories of their lives and events over the past 100 years. The centenarians, dubbed the 101 Club by the Countess, were all born after the end of World War I and during the reign of King George V, some 30 years before the coronation of the current Queen. They were born at a time when the British Empire covered a quarter of the world. The BBC were first established and David Lloyd George led a coalition government. Ruby said, "Sophie asked me about my family and my children and said that her daughter was about to sit exams, and I said I hoped she would do well. Peggy, who celebrates her 101st birthday in July, added, "Both the Earl and Countess knelt to speak to the three of us. They knew we struggled hearing and seeing, but they were both really interested in our life experiences." The Earl and Countess chatted to the three ladies during a special visit to Columbus House in Shanklin, where they also met people involved in organising the Bay's Jubilee celebrations, with many remembering the Queen's visit to Sandown and Shanklin in 1965. At that time there were no mobile phones, and people took their camera film to chemists to be developed. Lillian looked back proudly on the day they met royalty and said, "The royal couple spent so much time talking to us about our lives and our memories of the coronation and Jubilee events. It was very special being part of the 101 Club."
High price to keep town weeds at bay. Documented by Louise Hill. Switching to a safer alternative than chemical weed killer in Ventnor will cost its town council 10 times more a year. In April, Ventnor Town Council, VTC, banned the use of glyphosates in all non-ornamental areas of the town under its control, after the weed killer was reintroduced by Island Roads. While the markers of glyphosates say it is safe to use, there have been concerns and bans on the product in various parts of the world. The reintroduction of glyphosate caused issues within the town, including the potential effect it may have on wall lizards, and led to VTC looking at alternatives. At its meeting last week, VTC agreed to go ahead with the introduction of a safe alternative to glyphosate, but at a £1,171 price tag. Glyphosates have previously been used in 9 areas of the town at a fee of £129, with its use only once a year. Now the safe alternative would cost the council £260 for one application, but have to be applied up to 5 times a year to have the same effect as the chemical weed killer. This would see the cost increase from £129 to a potential £1,300 a year. The increase has been approved by VTC, but councillors raised question marks about the safe alternative use at Ventnor Park. To switch to the alternative at the park, costs would rise from £356 a year for the glyphosate use to £1,068 for one application, or, under the same logic, it would need to be treated 5 times, £5,340. That would mean an increase in fees to the council and residents of £4,984.
Cocaine in blood of driver. A man crashed his BMW into the racecourse roundabout while over the drug drive limit. Deverell Hudson, 48, of St John's Wood Road, admitted drug driving with cocaine in his system when he appeared at the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court last Friday. Liz Miller, prosecuting, said Hudson had been driving towards Newport when he said he was pushed off the road by a tipper truck which suddenly changed lanes. Police were called to the incident to find Hudson's BMW 3 Series crashed into a tree on the roundabout and the airbags deployed. Hudson wasn't there but had left the keys in the car. Police phoned him to find he had arranged recovery of his vehicle and had gone back to work. Hudson returned to the scene to be tested for alcohol and drugs and was over the limit for cocaine. Henry Farley for Hudson said it was a Saturday morning and Hudson had some cocaine the previous Wednesday, so was unaware it was still in his system. He said Hudson was hard-working dry liner in a long-term relationship and was full of shame and remorse. He was disqualified from driving for 12 months. He must pay £530 fine, £85 costs and a £55 surcharge.
All change at the NHS. There's all change again at the NHS as a new system comes into effect today. It spells the end of the Hampshire, Southampton and Isle of Wight Clinical Commissioning Group, only created in April last year, to be replaced by the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Integrated Care System, ICS. It is claimed that an ICS will remove barriers between organisations, delivering better care for patients, reducing inequalities, and providing better value for money. The Hampshire and Isle of Wight ICS will serve nearly 2 million people with 77,500 health and care staff, with a budget of £3.6 billion. The ICS is made up of an Integrated Care Board, ICB, and an Integrated Care Partnership, ICP. The ICB will run and monitor the organisation. It will also manage the funding and commission services with input from all the NHS trusts in the region. The ICP is a statutory committee and will be responsible for producing strategies on how to meet the region's health and wellbeing needs. Some key priorities have already been set for the Hampshire and Isle of Wight ICS. They include programmes of cardiovascular disease prevention, frailty and childhood trauma, forming financial and sustainability plans, recruiting 1,200 international nurses, workforce transformation, the alignment of the ICS to a 5-year strategy, and the delivery of urgent, emergency and planned care programmes, winter plans and primary care programmes.
Isle of Wight councillor faces 2 rape charges. Isle of Wight County Councillor Daryl Pitcher is facing rape and sexual assault charges against a young girl. He appeared before Island magistrates on Tuesday to face a string of serious sexual assault charges. The 46-year-old of Norman Way, Wootton Bridge, is accused of 2 charges of rape against a female under the age of 16 and 1 of indecent assault on a girl under the age of 14 years in Wootton between March 19th, 1989 and March the 20th, 1992, when he appeared at the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court in Newport. He was bailed to reappear for a plea and trial preparation hearing at the Isle of Wight Crown Court on August the 22nd. This is Mr Pitcher's second term as councillor for Wootton Bridge on the Isle of Wight Council, this time standing for the Vectis Party, which he founded. The first time he stood, it was under the UKIP banner, also standing for the party on the mainland in a general election. He is currently chair of the council's licensing committee. Mr Pitcher is also a Wootton Bridge parish councillor and has campaigned against the gravel extraction plan for the village. He is also involved with the Royal British Legion, being the Isle of Wight County Committee member, a Cowes Branch Committee member, according to his information held by the Isle of Wight Council. The information states he is also the regional representative of the Milestone Society. He formerly worked in the county press shop.
Today's children learn all about the war years. Documented by Suzanne Whitewood. Organised by Isle of Wight, Council's Heritage Education Service, HES, an event which recreated the scenario that tens of thousands of school children went through during World War II, was held recently. Based at Haven Street's Isle of Wight Steam Railway, the event allowed children to discover what it was like to be evacuated, with Haven Street Station transformed to replicate a wartime station and children acting out their evacuation. Pupils and staff dressed in wartime clothes. Once on board the train, they were waved off from the platform, giving them a feeling of how it was for children to be evacuated all those years ago. Pupils learned about wartime food and rationing, how life in a wartime school affected learning, and they also had the chance to look at make, do and mend toys and clothes. Activities included learning about rationing, how much margarine was allowed each week, or how to make that sweet treat last just a little bit longer. The organisation of moving children from one town to another was well planned during the war years. Teams in towns and villages were made up of members of the Women's Voluntary Service and local council officials. Today's children were made aware that being parted from loved ones, in some cases for years, was sometimes a daunting experience, with the recent COVID restrictions made by the wartime experience more relevant for most taking part. This event was planned and presented by Estelle Barker of the HES and a team of volunteers.
6 months or forever warning on pier closure. Ryde Pier's railway track could be shut forever if a 6 months closure for critical improvements did not go ahead, civil engineers have warned. An application has been made to the Marine Management Organisation, MMO, by Osborne Infrastructure on behalf of Network Rail to make the improvements. Osborne, the firm which would be carrying out the work, says the railway track on the pier is coming towards the end of its operational life and requires renewal and refurbishment. The MMO is consulting on the plans, including the extended closure, and comments can be submitted until July the 8th. The proposed work is split into 5 different zones along the stretch of track. Track approaching and stopping on the left side of the Ryde Pierhead platform, Zone 4, is the worst part. It is said to be a critical area for renewal and must be fixed by December. If work isn't carried out, experts say the railway would need to be closed for safety reasons. As part of the Zone 4 work, the boards protecting the station and track from the weather would be refurbished and repairs would be made to other elements that are heavily corroded. In documents submitted to the MMO as part of the application, it is revealed the stretch of railway track will need to be closed between September 2022 and February 2023 to complete the most serious work. At the same time, Network Rail has requested work is done in zones 1 to 3 to replace the track and refurbish some of the steel beams so as to avoid further future disruption. The refurbishment work needed on the rest of the line is less extensive, as parts of the track are a reasonable condition, although minor steelwork repairs are envisaged. Documents say the steelwork repairs will involve drilling and cutting the current structure to remove damaged sections and installing new elements. A proposed timeline has been set for the new renewal works to be carried out, supposedly starting this month and lasting until February, although until approval is granted, work cannot start. Other minor work is planned to be carried out over the next 3 years, depending on the tide and weather, according to the documents.
Bird flu hits RSPCA Centre. The Isle of Wight branch of the RSPCA has had to close its doors to wild bird admissions following a suspected case of avian bird flu. The team had to initiate a rapid response after a wild bird in their care displayed symptoms and had to be put to sleep. A spokesperson said, "This one case, although unconfirmed, has had a significant impact on our entire animal centre and now requires the temporary closure of our facility for a few days while we complete a full deep clean of our isolation areas and monitor other birds in our care for any signs or symptoms. We recognise that it is extremely upsetting for all involved and for the public. These actions are to protect other birds in our care and also humans and other mammals, as there is a risk to all. In addition, branches and centres in the south coast, from Thames Estuary to the Isle of Wight, have received national guidance not to take in gulls from south coast area due to the high zoonosis risk. This advice also urges all wild bird rehabilitators to liaise with their local vets, which is critical, as sadly some seabirds may be unable to be admitted into care. Guidance is that wildlife centres without proper facilities and high levels of personal protective equipment should absolutely not be taking in these birds due to the high zoonosis risk. We hope to be reopened for admissions as soon as our isolation intake area is cleared to reopen, and all the birds currently in our care are confirmed clear. This remains a rapidly evolving situation, and we will issue further updates in due course. We thank you for your kindness at this difficult time. If you find deceased wild waterfowl, swans, geese or ducks, or other deceased wild birds, such as gulls or birds of prey, you should report them to the DEFRA helpline, 03459 335577, option 7. Do not touch or pick up any dead or visibly sick birds. Phone a vet if you have concerns about a bird. Wild bird rescuers Kay Owensworth of Isle of Wight Wild Bird Rehabilitation is currently unwell. She had closed the doors to her sanctuary while she was poorly. However, on hearing the RSPCA had closed, she said she would resume her service.
Freshwater causeway repaired. After nearly a 4-year wait, work to replace the old barriers at the causeway in Freshwater has been completed. Residents had complained about the time it had been taken to remove the temporary barriers and unsightly cones and upgrade the site. Now Island Roads have completed the project ahead of its original target of September. David Howarth of the Isle of Wight Ramblers said, "I think they have done a wonderful job. The causeway is a popular place for people to take photographs, and these pictures will now be shown around the world." An Island Roads spokesman confirmed the project began earlier this month, following lengthy discussions with the Isle of Wight Council over the most suitable way of providing safe barriers that were also in keeping with the unique rural surroundings. The work also required other consents given to the location's environmental importance. We have installed a traditional-looking post and rail system using English oak posts supplied by local company Chesil Woodyard. The project has already received the thumbs up from the local community. Councillor John Medland, who represents Freshwater South, said, "I am delighted to see these works finally completed after 4 years of temporary barriers in an iconic local beauty spot. These repairs are just what the local community have been asking for."
University students take part in the summer dig. Dinosaur Isles is leading the way in providing specialist training for 55 university students from across the county, with a dedicated dinosaur excavation. The summer dig has been taking place this week in the rich 125-million-year-old fossil beds at Yaverland, and visitors have been watching the dig and seeing the work that is involved. Alex Peaker, Collections Officer of Geology at Dinosaur Isles, said, "It's great that Dinosaur Isle can pass on its expertise and knowledge that will help the students gain valuable excavation skills needed for their future vocation." Councillor Jonathan Bacon, Cabinet Member responsible for archaeology and heritage, said, "The summer dig provides a unique educational platform for the island to showcase its famous dinosaur heritage. It offers the perfect location and opportunity for students to get the essential hands-on experience and in one of the richest areas for dinosaur discoveries in Europe. It is also a great chance to encourage everyone to become inspired and re-engaged in paleontology and conservation. Part of a Neurovenator, a large carnivorous dinosaur, was first spotted by holiday makers on the island in 1978 and excavated by Steve Hutt, former curator of Dinosaur Isles. In 2009, the fossil of a small pterosaur was found by islander Daisy Morris when she was just 4 years old. And just this month, researchers announced the discovery of the remains of Europe's largest ever land-based predator dinosaur on the southwest coast of the island. The summer dig started on Monday and finishes today, Friday, at 4 p.m. on the beach at Yaverland.
Man admits strangling. A Newport man has been convicted of the new offence of non-fatal strangulation under Section 70 of the Domestic Abuse Act 2021. Last Thursday, Joshua James Hunt, 26, pleaded guilty at the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court. It became Hampshire's Constabulary's first conviction of this new offence and is amongst the first in the country. Non-fatal strangulation became an offence in its own right, separate to assault, on June the 7th. At around 11:50 p.m. on June the 17th, Joshua Hunt grabbed a woman by the throat in Little London area of Newport. She also sustained bruising to her arms. She attempted to free herself from his grip, and he let go when he noticed members of the public were around on their way home from the Isle of Wight festival. He then strangled the woman again to the point she could not breathe, before 3 people approached and police were called. Hunt of Petticoat Lane was arrested and charged with non-fatal strangulation and breach of restraining order. He was sentenced on August the 23rd and was remanded in custody. Hampshire Constabulary said, "We could not have got this conviction without the strength of the woman who came forward and told us what Hunt did to her. Her unwavering bravery has allowed us to apply this new legislation that was only passed into law less than 3 weeks ago." Chief Superintendent David Powell, lead for domestic abuse, said, "This was a shocking and violent assault, and I am pleased such swift action has been taken against the man responsible. I am grateful to PC James White and the team who'd led the investigation for recognising, interpreting and applying this new legislation so quickly to ensure the most robust response was undertaken when dealing with this awful crime. We would urge anyone who feels they are a victim of domestic abuse not to suffer in silence." Louise Holmes, CPS Wessex Senior District Crown Prosecutor and Domestic Abuse Lead, said, "Our prosecutors have received training on the new non-fatal strangulation and non-fatal suffocation offences. We are ready to apply the new legislation where there is sufficient evidence and our new legal test is met."
A day out on the water for disabled islanders. The Royal Victoria Yacht Club, RVYC, has been welcoming guests to its open day for people with disabilities since 1981, the first international year of disabled persons. This year the event will take place tomorrow, Saturday, from 11 a.m. until 4 p.m, with over 120 guests joining the RVYC for trips out on the water, a barbecue lunch, tea and cakes. A variety of boats will be available for disabled guests to take trips along Wootton Creek and out into the Solent. Some will venture out on fast ribs, while wheelchair users can get a float on Wet Wheels or Spirit of Scott Bader. Joining to spend time with the guests will be Mary Case, the Deputy Lord Lieutenant, Bob Seeley MP, Malcolm Hector, Parish Council Chair, and Ian Dorr, Isle of Wight Councillor. Invited guests include Sight for Wight, Parkinson's UK, Mountbatten, Cowes, Ryde and Ventnor, physically disabled, Ryde House, Southern Housing, Achieve Together, as well as individual island families with disabled members. A spokesman said, "The event wouldn't be able to happen without the support of the Royal Victoria Yacht Club members, who give their time and boats on and off the water."
Drug drive labourer banned. A labourer crashed his car into a wall while drug driving, claimed he was fit to drive and only had the accident because he avoided a head-on collision. Joshua Freely of Avenue Road, Sandown, admitted drug driving on the Mall Brading on March the 19th. Police were met by Freely, the driver of a Peugeot 106 car, which was badly damaged on the near side with oil leaking on the road. Freely was breath tested and said he was drinking the night before and had smoked a cannabis joint, said Anne Smout, prosecuting at the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court. There was no evidence he had passengers in his car. He provided a negative breath test and gave officers a swab, which was positive for cannabis, confirmed after his arrest with a blood test at Newport Police Station. In November last year, Island magistrates handed Freely a sentence for 4 months imprisonment, suspended for a year, for possessing a bladed article. As a result of his drug drive admission, Freely was in breach of it. For Freely, Oscar Vincent said his client had curbed alcohol consumption to the point of being teetotal and now avoids drugs. On the morning in question, he was off fishing when he came face to face with another car on the wrong side of the road at speed, said Mr. Vincent. Freely claimed he was forced to brake and slid 20 foot into a wall, while the other driver sped off, Mr. Vincent added. Magistrates were persuaded not to imprison Freely, with presiding magistrate Gordon Cooper commenting it would be unjust to do so, and the focus should be on continuing the strides being made to rehabilitate him. Freely was told his suspended sentence would continue, with the period extended by 3 months to 15, with an order to pay £360 fine, £85 costs, and a £36 victim surcharge. He was also banned from driving for 1 year.
Head injury. Emergency services were quickly on the scene at Colwell Bay on Tuesday afternoon after a man suffered a head injury following a fall. Yarmouth lifeboat headed towards the bay at 1:29 p.m, along with Needles Coast Guard's rescue and paramedics. The casualty was on terrain unsuitable, so once on the scene, lifeboat crews launched their smaller Y boat. Both the casualty and the paramedic were transferred to the lifeboat. They were then brought to Yarmouth, where they were met by a waiting ambulance.
Round the Island Race 2022, amazing Solent spectacle. Weather conditions could not have been better for the iconic Round the Island race on Saturday. Thousands of sailors of all ages and abilities took part in one of the most treasured events on the global sailing calendar. The Round the Island race, organised by the Island Sailing Club, is a challenge. A 50 nautical mile circumnavigation of the island with the prized Gold Roman Bowl, one of sailing's most revered trophies, up for grabs. Ian Atkins' Fast 40 boat, Dark and Stormy, won both the monohull line honours and the race overall to earn him the spectacular bowl. The last time this happened was way back in 1988 with Simon Le Bon maxi yacht Drum. Ian Walker, race tactician on Dark and Stormy, said, "The Round the Island race is a one-off. It's sailing's London Marathon and our chance to get as many people out on the water as possible to enjoy a fantastic day. We had a pretty tidy race, a good start with clear air, and we're leading monohull at the Needles, which helps, as I know what it's like when you're in the pack and there are boats everywhere, so it saves you a lot of time. Our boat is good downwind. We were fast reaching to St Catherine's and under a lot of pressure from Coomber, the other Fast 40. In fact, we swapped places a few times at St Catherine's, and then, once we got the spinnaker up, it was the question of whether we could hold it all the way down to Bembridge. We broached a few times and had to drop the spinnaker. At that point, we had 300 metres lead. Coomber did a great job of going inside us at the fort. Then we were bow to bow coming up the Solent. Fortunately, we got ahead of them with the code 0 just before Ryde Bank and then held it to the finish. It's a great race thanks to the fantastic organisation of the Island Sailing Club." Dave Atkinson, the Round the Island race director, said, "Competitors enjoyed a fair breeze with a favourable wind angle going through Hurst Narrows. There was a pleasant reach to St Catherine's, and then there was an incredible spectacle as the spinnakers started to be flown," he said. "A huge thanks to all the competitors for making this race for all so special, and to our race partners, without whom we couldn't stage such an incredible event. On shore there was great atmosphere in Cowes, competitors and spectators enjoying the entertainment in the official race village at Cowes Yacht Haven and in the Island Sailing Club.
Track to be renamed after legendary coach Ray Scoville. The Fairway Athletic Track in Sandown is to be renamed in memory of legendary track and field coach Ray Scoville, who died last year. His daughter Claire Apsey, who set up the Ray and Rosemary Scoville Trust after her mother died shortly after Ray, together with the late couple's grandson, Simon Apsey, will be attending the ceremony along with members of the Isle of Wight Athletic Club and friends on Sunday, July 10th. Afterwards, in the clubhouse, guests are invited to watch some great athletics at the Isle of Wight Athletic Club's next home league match.
No to e-scooters on Red Funnel. Fire safety is the heart of ban on the transportation of e-scooters on board Red Funnel ferries from Friday, the 1st of July. They will be prohibited on the Southampton to the Island routes and also from inside and outside its terminals. Meanwhile, push scooters must not be ridden in those areas. Red Funnel said, "Our policy is the place for the safety of our customers and staff due to fire safety concerns associated with e-scooter batteries, as well as the incident of both e-scooter and push scooters related accidents resulting in personal injury. Our policy is consistent with other transport operators and reflects a policy undertaken by Associated British Ports, which prohibits the use of scooters in any part of their port operations and estates. We thank our customers for understanding that our on-board and terminal areas are unsuitable environments for scooter usage. The safety of our customers and staff is our top priority. Until we hear differently from ABP, this policy will not extend to electric bikes." In the Queen's speech, the government unveiled plans to legalise the use of personal e-scooters. Currently, only rented ones can be ridden on public roads.
Islanders charged in Portsmouth drug swoop. 2 Islands men are facing drug charges and were due before a court in Portsmouth yesterday, Thursday. James Brian Rose, 27 of North Road, Shanklin, is charged with concealing criminal property and 2 counts of possession of Class A drugs with intent to supply. Martin Andrew Shotton, 44 of Sunhill, Cowes, is charged with concealing criminal property, drug driving and 2 counts of possession of Class A drugs with intent to supply. On Tuesday, officers from Hampshire Constabulary stopped in a vehicle in St George's Road, Portsmouth, at 9:30 p.m. According to police, a passenger left the vehicle and ran towards the Millennium Walkway at Gunwharf Quays. A rucksack was thrown into the water, which police say contained suspected Class A drugs.
A total of 21 members of the Cowes RNLI crew received their Platinum Jubilee medals from the Isle of Wight Deputy Lord Lieutenant Caroline Peel last Thursday, June the 23rd. The presentations were made at the Duke of York Hotel prior to the volunteer crew's summer family barbecue. The station also marked the retirement from the boat of Helms, Neil Archer and Jason Hughes. Both will stay on with Neil as shore crew and Jason a launch authority. A Cowes RNLI spokeswoman said, "Caroline is a hard-working RNLI volunteer herself in Bembridge and London. The venue holds happy memories for many inshore lifeboat crews from England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales, as it was the accommodation venue when inshore training was undertaken here. When Cowes Inshore Rescue was founded, the Duke of York was as generous and supportive to the independent boat as they are to the RNLI. It was a great evening for the crew, their partners and children. The food was delicious and the rain stopped just before we started. Earlier in June, Mrs Powell awarded members of Bembridge RNLI with their Platinum Jubilee medals.
Go ahead for 6 Bering Road homes. 6 new homes can now be built on the edge of Gurnard and Cowes after the Isle of Wight Council's decision was overturned by the government. In March last year, the Council's Planning Committee went against officers' recommendations and ruled to refuse planning permission for the mixed property development on Bering Road. Officers said the prior properties would meet the island's housing needs and be a suitable size, scale and design while not degrading the wider landscape character. The committee feared, however, the 6 houses and bungalows would bridge the gap between Cowes and Gurnard and agreed it failed to complement the character of the Jordan Valley. Now though, after the decision was appealed to the government's planning inspectorate by the developer behind the scheme, Roy Churchill of Meadowview Developments, permission has been granted. Weighing up the arguments, the inspector on behalf of the Secretary of State said they were satisfied the development would not cause undue harm to the character and appearance of the area. They said given that much of Bering Road was already predominantly developed, the proposed homes, which would sit opposite existing homes, would not make any meaningful difference to any actual or perceived coalescence between Gurnard and Cowes. Whilst the new houses would occupy greenfield land, which contributes to the open backdrop of the Jordan Valley, the inspector said, the modest scale and sympathetic siting of the proposed new dwellings would limit their impact on the open landscape. The inspector highlighted the island's failure to meet housing targets and out-of-date housing policies, which puts the council in a titled balance. Which means unless there is something significantly wrong with the plans, new housing should be approved. Overall, the inspector said there were no adverse impacts or harm found, which would outweigh the significant benefit of 6 new properties on the island. So the presumption in favour of development applied. They were satisfied the 6 new houses would not add undue pressure to the highways, network or other local services. The inspector added a condition to the planning permission requiring the approval of external materials used on the properties by the council to ensure the new houses properly integrate with the street scene.
Islanders are getting older. The island's population is growing fairly slowly, but is ageing more quickly than in the rest of England, according to official figures published this week. Statistics from the 2021 census confirm that the population of the Isle of Wight has grown by around 2,100 people, or 1.5%, over the last 10 years, significantly lower than the overall increase of England, 6.6%. The total population of England grew by nearly 3.5 million to 56,489,800, the highest it has ever been. However, the proportion of people over 65 have increased by 24.7% against an English average of 20.1%. The number of islanders aged from 15 to 64 have fallen by 5.3%, and the number of children under 15 has fallen by 6.3%. Although the population has increased by 2,100 over the decade, the number of households has increased by 3,950 to 64,800, an increase of 6.1%, meaning there are more people living alone or in smaller households. The census also gives information about population density, with 3 people living on each football pitch sized area of land on the island, compared with the most densely populated area, Tower Hamlets in London, with 112 people per football pitch.
Woman dies after bungalow fire in Northwood. A woman aged in her 80s has died almost a week after she was rescued from a fire in a bungalow on the island. Newport Ryde and Shanklin firefighters were called to Newport Road, Northwood, on June 20th at around 3 p.m. Firefighters spent around an hour at the incident. A woman rescued from the property was taken to St Mary's Hospital in Newport, where she was being cared for. However, Hampshire Constabulary has confirmed she died on Sunday, June 26th. The police force said, "We're investigating the circumstances surrounding the death. The fire is not thought to have been set deliberately at this time. Police are working with the fire service and the coroner to establish the wider circumstances."
New project manager for church. Ryde Town Council has appointed Tim Wander as project manager of the St Thomas's Church renovations, working with Brightspace Architects. The historic building is being turned into a home for Network Ryde. Tim has 25 years' experience working on refurbishment, renovation, construction and installation projects. He has been leading the restoration of the Grade 2 listed Northwood House in Cowes and has won 2 Island RIBA Architectural Conservation Awards. Lisa Dyer, Ryde Town Council clerk, said, "This is a very exciting appointment, as Tim can drive the project forward in ways that are impossible without his knowledge and experience. I am very confident that St Thomas's Church is now in the very best possible hands, and I'm happy to have Tim on board." Beck Swan, Network Ryde manager, said, "St Thomas's Church is going to be an incredible new home for Network Ryde and allow us to continue to grow the services that we offer. Having Tim involved makes the dream feel one step closer to reality."
My View by Holmesy from the Isle of Wight Observer. Listen to the people. 'Twas the morning after the night before. The Conservative Party had tanked in not one but 2 dismal by-elections. Bob had something important to say. "My campaigns for the island will continue," he asserted. That Devon loss was historic. The safest of safe seats. Gone because the people of Tiverton and Honiton wanted to send a very clear message on behalf of the nation. Bob said he talks to ministers every week and will keep doing so to get a better deal for the island. I'm one of the lacklustre Bob's most consistent critics, but I'd like to thank him. No, honestly. He's been our MP for 5 years now, and to keep hectoring ministers day after day as they hustle past him along the corridors of power with absolutely nothing to show for your efforts shows astonishing resilience and fortitude. It must feel like banging your head against a brick wall. Despite the dreadful by-election defeats, Bob's boss, Bulldozer Boris, was in no mood for contrition either. Under pressure, he reverted to Maggie's "we fight on, business as usual" mantra, as if that's what we actually want them to do. Boris and Bob pretend not to get the message, but the message couldn't be clearer. Reduce the cost of living. I just paid £120 to top up my already half-full car. At the pump, I started looking underneath it. I thought the tank must have sprung a leak. People live in fear of food bills and the fast-rising cost of everything else they need. Like immigration, inflation is hopelessly out of control. Housing is unaffordable, with particularly young people having little hope of ever getting one. The NHS is broken, probably beyond repair. It's reported a third of us will likely go private in the coming years, because that's where the doctors went to. If you're burgled, the police don't bother turning up. Over 90% of island burglaries are being unsolved. Thank goodness for speeding tickets. They continue to issue those efficiently if you stray a few miles per hour over the limit. Oh, and between us, we're losing £3 billion a year in fraud. Honestly, what have the Tories got right? Whatever happened to strong and stable? Boss remains in power because there's no obvious successor. One by one, his supporters have fallen away. It's hard to find anyone still backing him, although Priti Patel keeps going because he is her only hope of keeping her job. Ex-party leaders, including Cameron and May, want him gone, but our Bob remains unashamedly loyal, pinning his hopes on the fantastical island deal. If we had a strong Lib Dem candidate here, the Tories' stonking majority would be in serious jeopardy. If, as planned, the continuity gets split into two, he'll be toast. Empty promises only get you so far, Bob. In the end, people want results. A frequently non-operational refurbished choo-choo train limping from Shanklin to Ryde every hour or so won't convince many voters. The Tories have been in power for 12 long years, and mostly they have Brexit and Jeremy Corbyn to thank for that. In the wake of these dire by-elections results, Keir Starmer was in a triumphant mood, excitedly claiming, "We're going to be the next government." Oh dear, Keir, I'm no gambler, but I really can't see your lot forming a government, mate. Not unless you make an election pact with the Lib Dems. Most of your shadow cabinet are as unimpressive as the witless Tory counterparts. Would any of them make good one-for-one swaps? Boris and Bob need to understand that people are hurting. A business-as-usual message just isn't going to cut it.
Vector's View, Reflection on Island Life from the Isle of Wight Observer. This week, Lawrence Mead, Regatta Director of Cowes Week. As Regatta Director of Cowes Week, as well as being both a very keen sailor and an island resident, I probably see all sides of the regatta better than most people. We have just announced Visit Abu Dhabi as our new presenting sponsor, which helps offset 2 COVID-hit years, and we will run a new event, Winter Cowes Week, in Abu Dhabi each January. It's great to be able to take our event to additional and new location. One of the unique aspects of Cowes Week is that it is a town event. You don't have to buy tickets to come and watch. We can't put a fence around it to make money for selling tickets, and it's much an event for spectators, both tourist and local, as it is for the sailors. All that said, unless the sailors have great time, there is no event, so I have put a bit more emphasis on the competition out on the water since I took over as regatta director a couple of years ago. That makes it a very difficult event to run financially. There is a tradition and an expectation that the event will have fireworks to round out the week. But with sponsorship declining, entry fees from the boats racing will never cover luxuries like that. In addition, once upon a time it could be done relatively cheaply, but with the rules and regulations that now control everything, it's a major production to try and put on. We love the fireworks and we hope to bring them back in the future. Cowes Week is a town event and it is an event for everybody, but we have also had to increase the security around the event locations later in the evenings. Not only does this cost money, but for a family event, any hint that security is compromised is a huge problem for us to overcome. As usual, it's a tiny minority that caused the problems last year and risk an event that has run successfully for 196 years. Sailing is an incredibly inclusive sport, and because boats need crew, there is always a chance to get out, even for those who don't come from a sailing background. Many a sailing career has started sitting on the side of a boat, not knowing what's going on, just having a pleasant day out as a passenger. But for those who take it to, it's a great sport. We have competitors sailing with their families who aren't yet teenagers. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have people in their 80s still sailing competitively. It's a great sport for young people as it teaches responsibility and self-reliance. So it's a great shame that sailing is still seen as a rich man's sport. Yes, there are some very rich people on the water, but the vast majority are family or groups of friends who get out, come rain or shine, to enjoy the sport. Everybody is welcome. We have tri-sailing on the first 4 days, Family Day on Sunday with fun for all the family in the town, Women's Day, Youth Day and Charity Day. We also have a Royal Navy stand on the parade this year with unique opportunities to use some very special simulators. What else? Spectator boats to go and watch the racing, as well as a huge range of places throughout the town to enjoy the great British summer. All the details are on our website, cowsweek.co.uk.
The Isle of Wight Real Ale train in Steam Railway will be on the 16th of July.
Rhythm-Tree is back and tickets are on sale now at rhythmtree.co.uk, and it is on the 8th, 9th, 10th of July at Stycelet Farm, Thorness Bay.
A homage to legend Neil Diamond. Music homage Hello Again, a tribute to Neil Diamond, stops off at Shanklin Theatre on July 16th. Brooklyn Creed, who performed Neil Diamond's signature track, Sweet Caroline, on Channel 4 show Steph's Packed Lunch as part of their Platinum Jubilee celebrations, appears as the legendary performer.
And now letters. Civil liberties in the spotlight. From Anne Grant of Fareham. May I add to the voices on recent letter pages, cash versus card, white link and technological breakdown? Like Robert Chalk, I'm unhappy with the white link refusal of cash payment. Unacceptable dictatorship. Martin Jones has difficulty in obtaining the energy rebate via Isle of Wight Council. I too received a letter from my local council stating, rebate by direct debit only. This same is from every council, not only the Isle of Wight. Take heart, Mr. Jones. No local authority has the right to withhold the rebate by use to force people to hand over their bank details. I emailed my council and local councillor to complain. I offered a simple solution. Deduct the rebate from this year's council tax. Within 2 hours, my councillor replied. She spoke directly to the council office. Same day, they emailed me to confirm the deduction from my council bill. I suggest Mr. Jones does the same. Ask your local councillor to intervene. Joe McCall-Shaw gave witness to the latest pressure on people to use contactless payments. Much worse is on the near horizon. Recently on GB News, level-headed, learned TV presenter Neil Oliver described as sinister what big tech companies are trialling in some areas of Britain. Supermarkets are installing facial recognition payment checkouts. Forget cash and cards, your eyeball will pay for your cornflakes. What if your iris is similar to somebody else's? Previous government attempts as facial recognition systems failed and were abandoned, so why are supermarkets trying this? The other technological innovation is in some schools. Children now pay for their school meals via fingerprint readers. A worried Neil Oliver asked, have parents been asked permission for their children's fingerprints to be held on a database? Am I correct in thinking that adult fingerprints can't be stored indefinitely after they've been eliminated from police inquiries? If so, why is a database of children's fingerprints permitted by the government? Is there an agenda of building a biometric database on everyone? Why is there silence from all political parties on these civil liberties issues? We could be sleepwalking into a nightmare Orwellian future.
Seeking the Groves Family, written by John Miller of Melbourne, Australia. I was watching the TV programme Penelope Keith's Coastal Villages, and in a section on the island when she took the hovercraft to ride, the captain was Martin Groves. When I lived on the island in either Freshwater or more likely Watergate Road, Newport, a near neighbouring family had the surname Groves. This was some time between 1953 and 1971. I was wondering whether there was any way of finding out, without giving away any contact details, whether he is related to this family. Back in 2010, I made a return visit to the island, and through your Islanders Reunited section, I got in contact with an ex-classmate from Priory Boys School, and we had a class reunion of about 20 old boys, which brought back a few memories. I turned 77 in May this year, but still retain many memories. In 1953, I also made a return trip, and while standing outside the house where we lived in Freshwater, was approached by a lady asking if she could help me. As a result of this, I caught up with a childhood friend who lived next door and found out that their house was now occupied by the third generation of the same family, with a fourth generation on the way.
Long A&E wait times could be addressed. From Hans Bromwich of Cowes. How deeply depressing to read your story. Isle of Wight Hospital apologises over long A&E wait times in last week's issue. A reoccurring problem, and it isn't even winter yet. Issues are not going to be resolved by the proposed A&E upgrade, since the problem lies elsewhere. Namely, St Mary's inability to admit patients into appropriate ward settings until existing patients who are fit enough to be discharged have been moved. The issue is doubly sad if we were not for the fact that the Trust was provided with an imaginative design solution to this very concern over a year ago. The design centres around a relatively low-cost build that provides, among other things, a temporary holding unit for patients waiting to be placed in the community. The unit's purpose is to free up essential ward space so A&E patients can be speedily admitted into specialist wards where they can receive appropriate care and not held for hours in A&E. This discharge unit, Transit Hub, offers numerous benefits and features an articulating division wall that effectively accommodates the changing requirements of male-female places in a setting that houses a central nursing station with discrete technologies that maximise efficiencies. By all accounts, the proposal was well received by the Isle of Wight NHS Trust. The unit, or something along similar lines, just needs to be built, lest St Mary's is to face the same issues year on year. NHS patients and NHS staff deserve positive action on resolving reoccurring problems, not excuses and apologies.
Praising the sterling efforts of Amy's Pool by Keith Anderson of Brystone. This is a letter of appreciation to Paul Farmer of Amy. On Tuesday, June 21st, I contacted the Isle of Wight Council to report a full-sized fridge freezer washed onto the beach about half a mile southeast of Grange Chine. On Wednesday, Paul appeared on the beach to recover it. We pointed it out, only just visible in the distance. After a comment on the lines of, "You have to be joking," Paul trudged along the shingle to investigate. I fully expected him to return, needing further assistance. But no, he eventually reappeared dragging the freezer by its power cord through the surf. Each wave tried to push it back onto the sand and threatened to knock him off his feet. He then had to drag it up the shingle to his truck and load it on, though with a little help from two of us. He was truly knackered. I feel he deserves recognition for going beyond the call of duty. Too often we only criticise.
Reduce VAT, not income tax, from Tom Bradford of Brading. Paul Kettering's letter, No New Ideas, from the 17th of June is perfectly right. We need to stimulate the economy by encouraging people to spend And the best way to do that is by reducing VAT, not by reducing income tax, which only benefits those sectors of society who pay income tax. There is a huge proportion of the population who work part-time on the minimum wage and don't fall into the income tax bracket. Also, what about pensioners? Pensioners have been screwed over with the withdrawal of the triple lock on state pensions. Coming back to low-paid wage earners, they have been told they could not have inflation-level pay increases because this will stoke inflation. How are these people and pensioners going to manage? They simply won't be able to buy anything other than the bare essentials, which in turn is going to adversely affect the economy. It is a little wonder the country is facing widespread disruption, with the prospects of strikes which will further damage our economy. That said, strikes provide a useful mechanism to shift blame away from the government that has failed its people on numerous fronts over the last 12 years. I dare say the government will be encouraging strikes while verbally strongly condemning them, such is the level of their indifference to the problems many people face. And that is the Talking News finished today, so it's goodbye from Susan.
And goodbye from Rosie. The In Touch programme follows and the Scaffolding News follows that. Festivals. Visually impaired musicians changing the industry. We hear about Glastonbury Festival from Nina Chesworth's perspective. Nina had attended previous years with some sight, but this year was her first time as a completely blind attendee. We also take a look at access provisions at some of the UK's other festivals and how these have evolved over the years, with Gideon Feldman, who is the head of programmes at Attitude is Everything. Attitude is Everything have been campaigning for over 20 years to improve the disability access at live events. And finally, we hear about how American electronic dance musician Lachi is changing the industry for disabled artists. She campaigns and consults on disability inclusion, including at the White House, and this year she's launched RAMPD, Recording Artists and Musician Professionals with Disabilities. The interview was first broadcast on the BBC World Service's arts programme, The Cultural Frontline. The presenter is Peter White, the producer, Beth Hemmings, and production coordinator, Liz Paul.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Good evening. Well, wow, what a weekend for music fans. Paul McCartney, Diana Ross, Sam Fender, all at Glastonbury, and that's before you even mention the Rolling Stones at BST Hyde Park. But just how easy is it for visually impaired fans to get the best out of a festival like Glastonbury, with its size, its crowds, and the sometimes rather erratic nature of artists' idea of accurate timekeeping? In a moment, we'll be hearing from the organisation, which has been campaigning for 20 years now to improve the disability access at music venues. But first, we've had our own mystery shopper at Glastonbury, there to enjoy the music but also to give a sense for us of what it's like and the best ways of enjoying it. Nina Chesworth, you were there with your husband and two sons, Dylan and Alfie. So how was it for you?
It was amazing. This was my 8th time. It was definitely different to how I've experienced the festival before.
Because you've lost most, if not all, of your sight now. As I said, you've been there in the past. I just wonder what the big difference for that was, if there was one.
So, yeah, I had vision in just the one eye before, usable vision. So I was able to see a lot of the festival and what it could offer. Whereas this time I have no sight now, and the difference is there's no visual. You know, I wasn't picking up on all them quirky, funky outfits and all the visual art that they have floating around the festival. And also not being able to see the stage at all was very different. being open-minded going into it was first and foremost. I didn't want to restrict myself in any way. So I thought, I know sound is going to be very important for this festival. I need to be more organised this time round, just focusing on what I could do rather than what I couldn't do, so that it gave the best chance to enjoy it.
But there were a few tricky moments even before you got to the music. Tell us about them.
Yeah, so once we got there, we got through okay, we got our wristbands fine, but once we got onto the campsite, and I have stayed in the disabled camping previously, but never obviously without the site. So because I arrived, I think, with my sons and husband, I don't know whether it was that they just assumed that, you know, they'd be there to support me and help, but we got a little bit lost. We couldn't find where we were supposed to pitch. We started pitching up in one place and we were told it was the wrong place.
Let me stop you there, because you were equipped with a smartphone for us. We can actually get a bit of the flavour of what went on there.
So we just got to the disabled campsite and trying to find a pitch. It wasn't that organised and we had to change spots, which was a bit of a nightmare because obviously I can't help, so we had to lug stuff around and then move again. Communication wasn't that great, but the boys are here now, putting the tent up, and I do feel a little bit bad that I can't help them.
But things did get better, didn't they? It's amazing when you do things like this, how after the first night of chaos, things always look better in the morning.
So this morning has gone really well. We've seen the Libertines and Ziggy Marley. We're just on the viewing platform now at the other stage, which is amazing. Nice space. The staff are all really helpful. So today's Sunday. We had a fab day yesterday. Had a mooch around the healing fields and the craft fields. Dylan done some wood carving. It was so much fun. So relaxed up there, such a nice vibe. We're now at the park about to watch Fleetmat Wood. Then we're going to head over to check out Diana Ross. It's been such a great festival so far.
So things had obviously picked up by then, Nina.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely got easier once I got the hang of things.
OK, well, I tell you what, I'm going to be talking to Gideon Feldman from the organisation Attitude is Everything, because for the past 20 years, they've been working to make venues generally, and festivals in particular, take more account of the needs of disabled music fans. And for the past decade, Gideon himself has been a part of that process. He told me how Attitude is Everything got started.
Well, the organisation started simply because our founder, Suzanne Ball, was saying, why can't I go to the gigs that I want to go to as a disabled person? And the question got picked up by the Arts Council, who said, that's a really interesting question, go find out. She did some research, and basically what came back was the industry at that time, back at the turn of the century, at 2000, we're just a little bit confused about how we can implement the Disability Discrimination Act, as it was at that time, appropriately. And instead of actively getting involved, it was a little bit of, we're kind of looking at what other people are doing and waiting. And so from there, Suzanne built out some case studies and some opportunities for engaging with access provision, and the charter, the Live Events Charter, was born from that and kind of built out of there.
And what are the key aspects, would you say, of going to music, especially perhaps for visually impaired people, which you've been trying to improve?
So things that we started talking about, such as accessible viewing platforms. It means you can sit down and be in an area where you haven't got that dynamics of movement that might be an issue for some people. In the nicest possible way, getting up to the mojo can be really difficult in large festival situations. If you're able to get there, that's fantastic. But even when there, you're still going to be a reasonable way from the crowd. So a viewing platform means you can enjoy a show in a much more relaxed environment.
Now, over this period of time, festivals, of course, in particular, have been on the increase. I gather more than 900 of them now, big and small. Now, they are, by definition, quite challenging, aren't they? You know, some of them pretty big, Glastonbury as an example. The noise, part of the attraction, but sometimes tricky to negotiate if you're blind. And their rather anarchic nature. You know, we heard Nina there talking about having to move her camping pitch, for example, because it wasn't in the right place and they had to move it. I mean, how receptive have the festivals been to the idea of making themselves accessible?
With the caveat that I can only talk about the ones that engage directly with us, I would say they're all very receptive. Festivals are putting in place things like access routes, so secondary routes to move around a festival site, which might take out some of the really high impact crush, potentially, you know, lots of people trying to get through a small space area, and you get sort of cut throughs basically to other areas of the festival site. We're talking about large print menus. And so, I mean, if you looked at Glastonbury bars, the majority of them had a large print menu on offer on the surface of the bar. And we're also, you know, having conversations about how the apps work for festivals. It's still something that we are in the early stages of, but actually, you know, having apps, which now they all have zoomable maps on of the festival site if they have an app, but also talking about how the apps work with the access features of people's phones so that there is audio talk back. We haven't quite got as far as we'd like to with that conversation, but it's definitely an area that festivals are actively looking at how that can work within their festival apps.
If you're not good at all that stuff, and not everybody is, well, what about human help? Can you get that? I mean, Nina went with family, but, you know, some people might say, I want to go on my own. I want to give it a go.
So absolutely, every festival that we work with offer companion or personal assistant tickets at no additional cost. But for people who do want to attend, you know, without that, then festivals have lots and lots of staff around. So there are stewards at almost every corner. And we're delivering more and more training into festival organisations so that more and more people have had disability equality training before you arrive on site. So even if people don't have the information to their hands, they can find out what someone might, you know, ask them reasonably quickly and easily, but without it being too much of a hassle.
Can I ask you about one thing that might prove to be a problem even before you get there? And that is the issue of booking. If you're blind, I mean, it's basically online. Some visually impaired people struggle with that. And even if they don't, speed is of the essence, isn't it? Are there any special arrangements to help people book?
There are some areas that we ask, and I absolutely agree that the timeout is really frustrating, really frustrating. Again, with charter venues, we ask that there's an opportunity for customers to email in or even phone the access coordinators for those festivals. That way they have someone that they can engage directly with. And so for any festival that we work with, there'll be an access email address which you can email into. So you've got confidence that that email is going to someone who understands access requirements. And you can either ask for a call back, or you can explain the situation, such as, you know, have difficulties getting all the information in within the timeout period. Can you assist? And there are ways that they can do that. Doesn't save the issue of, you know, festivals like Glastonbury, which might sell out within, you know, half an hour.
Yes.
And there is still room to review and assess the access process for that. Not everything's perfect. We haven't got everything right.
Gideon Feldman from Attitude is Everything. Nina is still with us. Just to return to your own experience, and having listened to that, Nina, you had some booking problems yourself, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. It was when we were doing the PA application, and it was uploading pictures, because you had to upload a picture of your passport and certificate of disability, and it just wouldn't load. And you know, I got my husband to look at it, and then I got my mum, and I don't think it was just a disabled problem, but my screen reader wouldn't read it and they couldn't figure it out, so it was a bit of a nightmare. Yeah, it was really difficult. We got there.
Now, I mean, Gideon was talking there about the use of smartphones and apps. Did you, I know you had a smartphone because you were using it for us. Did you use the apps at all?
I did, yeah. I downloaded the Glastonbury app, and with the voiceover on my iPhone, it read it, but I don't know whether it was because of the way that the lineup was listed. It didn't read it very well. So I gave up on it, and then I just relied on my husband and sons to tell me who was on, and their taste in music is slightly different to my taste in music. So they would, I don't think I got all
Didn't they tell you everything? Oh, that's naughty. That is naughty. Just one more thing, Nina. I mean, I know you ended up having a good time. We could hear that. But I just wonder what you think could be improved and what you think you learned from this experience as now a totally blind person, and what you might do next time for your 9th visit.
I think the apps can definitely be improved on, and maybe offering some form of audio lineup separately, so it's not an app. Maybe that could be on offer within the campsite. I also am 100% definitely staying in a camper van. I am not going back to a tent.
Well, thank you very much for doing it for us. And it's been good fun to share your experiences, good and bad. Nina, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Well, one issue Attitude is Everything has also concentrated on is access to the music business for performers. Of course, there are always the big names like Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, but breaking in can still be very tough. It's a subject which BBC World Service tackled on its arts programme, The Cultural Frontline. Presenter Tina Dahealy has been talking to Nigerian-American electronic dance star Larchi. She is now successful and well established with 7 albums to her name. She's even consulted on disability access in the White House. But in the early days, she felt she had to hide her visual impairment to get a fair hearing.
The music industry has a lot of machismo associated with it. And I was just afraid people were going to be like, nah, I don't really want to deal with her. Does she need help? Just not even allowing me into the rooms. And so I did what I could to get into those rooms as much as I could first. And so I hid a lot about myself, including my disability.
That must have been incredibly difficult because you were presumably going in and out of dark nightclubs. How did you manage that, and how did that impact your work? How did you disguise your disability?
I gained a skill in adapting, right? Making stuff up as I go. And that's pretty much what I had to do, was be quite the chameleon to get in and out of places. The only issue with that is when you're blind, you can't see. Apparently that's the definition of being blind.
It is.
So I would bump into things. I would trip on my way into the studio. Even little things like not exactly knowing which way to face for the microphone, or when I'm in nightclubs or at gala events. It turns out that the music industry is very heavily a networking, sell yourself industry. And if you don't wave back to the right person, you could lose a gig. You could lose a whole record deal. You could lose a international tour invitation. I didn't know what I was losing for not waving back. And I had to change that.
So what was the turning point? When did you decide to come out about your disability, and why?
So the way that came for me was that I actually started getting really good at my art. I started becoming a very good singer-songwriter and self-producer. I got signed to a great management agency. And from then on out, I started feeling the confidence myself to go, why am I hiding this? Who am I doing this for? I didn't end up losing any gigs or any opportunities. In fact, I gained a lot because folks began to really understand me, know my story, and see that there is a much deeper dimension. It's already interesting being a Black woman in America and trying to survive. But then to add the disability element, it just really says, I have something unique to say. Do you want to hear this perspective? Sit down and listen.
Earlier this year, you launched Ramped, recording artists and music professionals with disabilities, which brings together disabled music professionals. Why is a group like Ramped needed in today's music industry?
Ramped aims to amplify disability culture, advocate for accessibility, and promote inclusion for folks in the professional industry so that we can begin to see more of this as a natural diversity within entertainment and within music, and to start creating those role models for the next generation so that they can see themselves on stages, so that they can see themselves in ads, and so that non-disabled people can start to have disability culture influence their everyday life. The advantage that RAMPT has is that, you know, we're setting ourselves up as a prestigious, competitive entity. And we want to be able to deal with competitive entities within the music industry to really start making change. You know, I believe that change is when the folks who want change are the folks writing the checks. So, you know, getting more folks with disabilities, not only on stages, but in board seats.
In decision-making positions, you're so right.
In decision-making decisions, that's when we see change. I know just the other day, I was elected to be in the Recording Academy board, which is a big sort of deal for me. I'm a blind Black woman in America. And now I'm on one of the highest seats in the music industry. That's change.
That was American electronic dance star Larchie talking to Tina Dahealy for Cultural Frontline on BBC World Service. And that's it for today. If you've got views or experiences on access to music, do contact us. You can email in touch at bbc.co.uk. Leave your voice messages on 0161 836 1338 or go to our website bbc.co.uk/in touch. From me, Peter White, producer Beth Hemmings and studio manager Mike Smith, goodbye. But let's leave tonight's last word to Nina Chesworth.
There is not a better Glastonbury moment than sitting in a blow-up sofa with my son. We're at the Pyramid stage, listening to Elbow. Life can't get any better than this, sight or no sight. This is a moment I'll remember forever.
At Cowes, 82 Park Road, 2 Brooklands Road.
Ride area, the Crown Inn pub, St Thomas's Square, High Street, 3 Cross Street, Ride Masonic Hall, John Street, 42 George Street and Jack's 75 Union Street. Ride Skips, 21A and 22A Cross Street, 50 Harding Road, 3 South Street, The Cottage, Upper Green Road, St Helens.
Seaview, Warren Boats, Bluet Avenue. Seaview Skips, Buccaneers, Ferry Road.
Sandown, 20 High Street.
Ventnor, 2 High Street, 24 Spring Hill, Ash Farm, Ventnor Road, Whitewell. Ventnor Seawall, Belgrave Road.